field. But we begin with football. Certainly not the start we wanted in the Big 12, right? But year two, hopefully, will be better. Joining me to help break it all down, 5-7, 2-7 in the Big 12. 5-game losing streak was tough. Some good wins in there at the beginning. But to help us break it down are some all-time legends, some Mountain West All-Conference guys, NFL guys, linebacker, receiver, David Nixon, Austin Collie. Great to have you in studio, guys.
Hey, always fun to be talking football in June. I mean, we're getting closer, and you can feel it in the air. Starting to get warmer outside. Let's go.
Austin, thanks for getting the memo on the shirt, man.
You know, yeah, I just said, what's Jerem rocking?
We're going.
Coordinated.
We got a button down with the chain. Yeah. You look nice too.
I like it.
I did say, don't tell Dave, though.
Yeah.
Don't tell Dave.
Well, clearly. That's awesome. Okay, so last year there was a strong start to the season, 5-2. At that point, I felt like, I think we all did, hey, bowl game's happening. Can we get to 8? Last 5 were tough. Offense sputtered a little bit. Defense held its ground and then kind of sputtered as well. It was a growing year where now we know what it takes in the Big 12, I think.
Yeah, listen, this team got exposed a little bit. And I think we all thought that the first year in the Big 12 might be pretty difficult just because you're trying to get used to the grind of a conference schedule like that. You know, if you recall, BYU would start off strong in Independence, and then they have New Mexico State at the end, right? Whereas in this one, the Big 12 schedule is a whole different beast. And we saw fatigue set in. We saw injuries set in. And ultimately, this team just couldn't find a way to win games. They were in games. You look at the Oklahoma game, you look at Oklahoma State, they were in those games, and it came down to just finding ways to win and compete and finish, right? Finish is the main key word. If I'm those guys this year in the locker room, the offseason motto for this year is finish. Finish every game, finish every drill. I remember going back to our years, Bronco instituted something called super games. And that was because we struggled finishing in prior years, and he wanted us to compete. And compete till the end. And I think that's something this team has to figure out this year is compete to the end and finish these games and hopefully find themselves winning more games than what we saw last year, obviously.
What was the super game? What were those?
You know, just an array of different games, competitions, right? I think, you know, my squad, along with Max and Dennis, I think won it every year.
False.
No big deal. You know, just the offense putting it on the defense as, you know, per use. But no, you know, it was good. I think the one thing that stuck out to me, and I'm sure stuck out to the players talking to them, is just the level of competition across the board when you get into the Big 12, right? When you get into a Power 5 conference, you're competing against a guy who's a dude, right? Always has been, you know, typically a 4 or 5-star recruit. Has been taught the fundamentals from some of the best coaches in the country. So, you know, you go into Independence, you're not going to find that, right? There's going to be a big drop-off depending on the position group. Here across the board in the Big 12, there's going to be a dude in every spot. And that takes some getting used to. Game planning-wise, that takes some getting used to. You got to really be picky and really kind of isolate where your best matchups are going to be. And even in those best matchups, you got to know it's going to be a dogfight.
Let's talk about the offense specifically, and then we'll get to the defense. So SP Plus ranked 75th, points per game 99th. These are not where you want to be offensively for BYU. The run game really struggled. Points per play, not great. Keaton Slovitz's guy gets hurt. Jake Retzloff is preserved for a red shirt, plays the last 4 games. It's tough competition. He played 4 of the top 5 teams in the Big 12. Offense sputtered. Where do we begin to assess what needs to be better for this year, Austin?
Yeah, I would say the run game, of course, and I'm sure Dave is going to say the exact same thing. But I'll probably piggyback on the fact that, you know, on the O-line comment, they struggled, right, at times. And I think it was apparent even just to your average viewer and fan that the O-line, communication-wise, assignment-wise, was not sharp, was not crisp. And when the guys up front, man, the guys in the trenches aren't doing what they're supposed to, or there's missed assignments, missed blocks. They're not able to get their hands on anybody. That affects the entire offense, right? From the run game to the passing game, giving, you know, the quarterback enough protection. I think that was a big issue, right? Like, you want to make your quarterback. I think college football offenses live and breathe and die with the quarterback, right? And if you got a quarterback that's back there that feels comfortable enough to go through his progressions, make the right reads, and just play pitch and catch, that makes all the world of a difference. And then obviously opening up the run game, right? If you have a great ground game, obviously he's going to force everybody in the box to play a little bit more downhill. Now things are going to open. Holes are going to get bigger for the wide receivers to kind of exploit.
Okay, let's talk about that quarterback position, David. Gary Bohannon comes in, was at Baylor previously, South Florida, BYU, played him twice. They've seen him. That's the thing with BYU football. If you played against BYU, you might play for BYU in the future. We've seen that a little bit. Jake Retzlaff had 4 games of experience. Do you expect Retzlaff to be the starter in Game 1 against Southern Illinois or Bohannon?
I do. With that being said, I think Bohannon brings obviously some senior leadership. He's been around the block. He's had to learn a lot of offenses. He's seen a lot of defenses as well. I think he'd be a fantastic mentor for Jake. But ultimately, I think it's Jake's job. And I think he showed last year he's got the ability. He's just got to make better decisions. And we've seen that with some of our own quarterbacks. You look at John Beck and even Max Hall. In their earlier years, they tend to force the ball a little bit and make decisions that maybe weren't the best. But as they grew, they learned from their mistakes, and they improved and got better along the way. So I think Jake, I saw him throw the ball just a couple weeks ago to his receivers. He's zipping it around, and I think he's got the ability. Once again, now it's just mental and be able to kind of stay with the game and understand, okay, that's a good pass, but let me find a better pass, right? And maybe to try not to squeeze into that window because it might get picked, and that really hurts the team if so. But what I also think Jake brings to the table is his legs. And Austin touched on it. This run game, you can't sugarcoat. The run game was terrible last year. One of the worst in the NCAA, 104 yards a game. And I think that's put on the O-line, but also I think that's put on the running back and quarterback. I think, if you can bring an element of a dual threat quarterback like Jake brings, and now you've had a whole offseason, and A-Rod's had a whole offseason as well to kind of implement kind of a scheme around him. Man, I think that alleviates a lot of pressure off the O-line and helps with that run game. And you also look at A-Rod's history, right? You look at his last few quarterbacks, Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall. These guys were dual-threat quarterbacks.
And year 2 as a starter was much better, which is expected.
Which is expected, right? I mean, last year, Keaton Slovis, not such a dual-threat quarterback, right? And then
although he runs a 4.5 40 at the combine, and he had 2 touchdowns rushing in the first game.
Guys got gas.
Yeah.
We didn't know it.
Hey, listen, maybe the pads slowed him down or something because it looked like it was like a 4.9 on the field.
It's like Puka, his football speed was better than his 40 speed.
Yeah, so I think the run game will improve, but that's the first area they've got to figure out. And because, like I said, it was one of the worst in college. And that results in a terrible third down percentage as well. They were behind the chains all season. They were, I think, 23 or 28% from third down, which puts you in a bind. It's tough to go win games when you're struggling that often to convert.
The one thing that I'll say about Jake, too, is Jake is going to make mistakes. Okay, he's going to make mistakes. I don't think Jake is. He's not on that level where you can expect a mistake-free game. The difference is that Jake has a certain moxie or a certain quality, intangible quality about him that he's going to will a win. Right? He has that ability to, whether it's through his arm, through broken plays, extending broken plays, which is what our offense here at BYU highly relies on, or he's going to get it done with his feet on the ground, right? I think we saw glimpses of that last year when he was able to extend plays that maybe we weren't getting out of Keaton. So those extra 3 to 4 yards that he would get after a broken play or getting forced out of the pocket, I think that is something that he's going to bring to the table, and he's just kind of got this, I know I'm not maybe as on that level as some of these other quarterbacks in the league or college, but I'll tell you what, like, I'm going to put the team on my back. I'm going to make sure I give it everything I got and leave it all out on the table and get a win.
So listen, if we learned anything last decade, if you're the backup quarterback, you better be ready to play.
Be ready.
If you're Gary Bohannon,
be ready.
You be ready because BYU's had just a carousel of quarterback play the last 10 years with injuries and things like that, and it's not going to get any easier at the Big 12 with Utah and Arizona State guys, thumpers. These teams love to hit, and so there's chances for injury, so be ready.
Aaron Roderick made a big deal out of spring that Jake Retzlaff didn't throw a single pick in 11 on 11, which is a big deal. And I asked him, was he being aggressive too? He said, oh, yeah. So he loves that he did not turn it over in spring. He's going to turn it over in the season. But if you can limit those, let's go. Okay, let's talk about the defense last year. 94th in SP+, 96th in points allowed per game, 106 in yards per game. Again, you don't want to see triple digits or in the 90s in these. Room for improvement. Those last 5 games were tough, right? Giving up nearly 38 a game. David, what do you expect in year 2 under defensive coordinator Jay Hill?
Yeah, real quick, a stat that didn't show up there is rushing yards, right? You look back at the West Virginia game.
We only have so much space.
I know. I mean, that's a part that's hard for me to watch. And talking to the team, that's something they've addressed in the offseason as well, is is stopping the run game, right? I mean, they were one of the worst in the NCAA, averaging giving up 4.86 yards per carry. So they've got to improve that. So I think for BYU, it was going out there and beefing up that defensive line. Some good transfers that came in to help beef that up. But you've got great returners coming as well. I mean, you look at this BYU defense, there's guys coming off injuries. You look at Ben Bywater that's coming off an injury, Micah Harper. You get talent back with Talon Alfrey and Jacob Robinson. You look at the front. I mean, you've got a lot of John Nelson, Tyler Batty decided to come back. There's some huge additions to this defensive line as well as this defense as a whole that BYU will be able to play into. And so I'm excited for this defense. I think they've got the potential. I think you've obviously got the right coach at the helm. And I think
referring to Jay.
Exactly, Jay Hill being the coordinator. I love the position coaches. I love everything about it. I think last year this defense, sometimes if you have an offense that's struggling and puts you in bad situations or 3 and outs, you don't get a chance to catch your breath, whatever it may be, you become susceptible. And I think with injuries as well as an offense that was sputtering and struggling, this defense kind of got picked apart. And so I think this defense could benefit from a productive offense, but as well as I think another year being in the scheme from Jay Hill will help this defense tremendously. And I'm excited to see what they can bring because they've got the dudes out there as well. They've got guys that have produced at one point or another. Some got hurt and some had to come back. But you put them all together, assuming they stay healthy, they've got a pretty decent squad out there.
Let's talk about some of the notable changes specifically on the coaching staff for BYU, trying to jumpstart that run game. TJ Woods coming in to run the offensive line. He came from Georgia Southern. He's had Power 5 experience previously with Gary Anderson, who's an analyst, by the way, big time behind the scenes at Oregon State and Wisconsin. Kevin Gilbride comes in and coaches the tight ends. This guy was with the Giants, Bears, Panthers from 2010 to 2022. BYU hires dudes from the pros. We have Kevin Young in hoops, Kevin Gilbride running the tight ends. What kind of difference will these two make in jump-starting the offense, specifically in the run game?
Yeah, I think you know it's not going to be hard to improve the offensive line's performance and what they what they put out there on the field, the product that they put out there on the field from last year. The one thing I will say is Coach Gilbride, I've heard nothing but great things talking to the tight ends. Anthony Olson and Keanu and Reiner, the new addition. They've got nothing but great things to say about him and say that he's extremely valuable, and the things that they are learning are extremely valuable that they've started incorporating their tool set. But when you got a guy that's had an NFL pedigree, he's seen how it's done, right, at such a high level, has worked with guys that are not only, great at blocking, but also can run routes, catch the ball, which is what we're going to need out of a lot of these tight ends. It's only going up, right, in terms of those positions, and obviously, yeah, we'll wait to see kind of what the real value is on game day on the field.
Can't wait till August 31st against Southern Illinois. We mentioned some of the additions. Gary Bohannon to come compete in that quarterback room. Jack Kelly is a 4-star linebacker coming from Weber State. Jay Hill's Weber State time still benefiting BYU with some of these guys. Mark Collins as well, expected to be a defensive back starter, perhaps a cornerback. And you mentioned Reiner Swanson. He's a freshman expected to play. Let's wrap with this. Why will year 2 in the Big 12 be better than year 1?
Listen, I'm going with just more familiarity with the conference as a whole. I mean, you've now played all these opponents. You know how to scout them. And then I think some continuity. We talked about all the returners coming back. You look at all the guys that have contributed at one point or another back on the squad. I love Jack Kelly. Talking to the coaching staff, I asked him, I said, hey, is this an upgrade or about the same as A.J. Bombachon, who had a great season, one of the leaders last year? And they were like, oh, it's an upgrade. He's a dude.
And A.J. was good.
A.J. was good. He said Jack can really move, fluid hips. And so, he led Weber State in sacks, 10.5 sacks last year. And so I expect him, he has a nose for the ball. So I'm excited for him on the defense side of the ball. And then offensively, I mean, like I said, this offense, it was there. There were glimpses of brilliance last year, but they just couldn't sustain it. And so for this year, it's just learning to not shoot yourself in the foot with turnovers, but continue to be productive. And you've got guys, you talk about Reiner, look at Keanu Hill, throws on some weight, goes to tight end. I mean, that's a mismatch all day long.
Those
at the tight end
two,
position,
they're
right?
very excited about.
So there's dudes all across the field. The question is, can they put it all together? And can BYU not go out there and like I said, shoot themselves in the foot and be behind the 8 ball? Because we noticed that it's tough to come back in the Big 12. You can't make a big surging mount at the end. It's kind of a grinded out type football. And so learning from last year, knowing kind of what the expectations are, having scouted these teams, I'm pretty optimistic going into this year for sure.
The other thing I'll say is, if you go back and look at the film from last year, like the last 5 games, not great, right, on paper. But if you go back and you take a look at the film, and then you also combine that with what you're hearing out of practice, the way that those guys were handling practice, the veteran group, the leadership group, taking accountability, understanding, hey, something has to change here. We can't keep doing the same thing and expecting the same results. Hearing guys like, Chase Roberts stepping up as a leader, being an underclassman and saying, hey, you know what? We're all going to stay after practice, and all the plays that we screwed up, we're going to sit here and we're going to do it until we get it right on our own time. Like, you hear those types of things, and then you go back and you watch the film, and you see kind of what the momentum was looking like. Even though, like I said, it didn't show on paper and it didn't show on the scoreboard, there are so many good, to me, it looked like a completely different team, right? David mentioned continuity. It looked like a team that was collectively knew what the goal was, had defined what the goal was, knew what the expectation was, and what was accountable from each other, and were doing everything that they could to do that, or to get to meet that standard or meet that expectation. And you just didn't see that in the first, I'd say, 6 games, right?
I would say if there's anything positive for BYU ending their season on kind of losing streak, it's the fact that that's a sour taste in your mouth that hopefully
you both tasted that pre-mission, right?
03. I remember that was they win the offseason with the added motivation, because it's a terrible feeling. Everyone wants to go bowling at least, right? But to know you were that close, hopefully they've used that as kind of their driving motivation this offseason to come out and come out strong. They have the ability, they know they have, because when they put it together, you're hanging with Oklahoma and should have beat Oklahoma, right? And then Oklahoma State at the end of the year, who, and so when they know they can put together, they can hang with anybody in the Big 12. And I think that's the part that you hang your hat on, knowing that if we don't shoot ourselves in the foot and we play our style of football, we have a chance against anybody.
And they will have a chance against many of the good teams in the Big 12. 4 at home, by the way, of the top 5 by FPI. That's going to be fun. Guys, thanks for coming in the studio. David, next time we'll text you about the wardrobe.
I'll put it on next time. Yeah,
Always ready to golf.
Yeah.
I like that look.
There you go.
Thanks, guys.